All right. We're rolling. We're speeding.
Sweet.
What's going on, everyone? And welcome back to the Odum and Andrea show. This is our podcast where I sit down with my beautiful wife, Andrea, and we talk about someone that has done something really cool. Andrea reads a book, and we discuss that book, and we kind of see if there's anything that they've done that we might want to incorporate into our lives, into our adventures. And today, we're going to be talking about a book from Carolyn Van Hemert?
I think so.
Hemert?
Hemert.
Hemert. It's called The Sun is a Compass, a 4,000-mile journey into the Alaskan wilderness. Interesting. And on this, okay, here's a picture. I'll just put that up. And you can see that there's a person walking alone in the tundra. Looks like over a frozen lake with some type of canoe type thing with a bunch of shit with poles and whatever and just hiking. So I don't know. I think you said you were really excited to read this book. I don't know if it's because you think this is something I want to do or whatever, but I don't know how much fun this looks like. I don't know that much fun. Where's the shotgun for polar bears? I don't know. Yeah, so this is the book that we're going to be reading today. So this should be good.
Yep.
4,000-mile journey into the Alaskan wilderness. Yeah, that does sound kind of cool. So thank you for joining us. And with that, I'll just say if you like any of the stuff we do, check us out at odumandandrea.com where we have all of our other podcasts. And with that, I don't think there's anything else to say. We should just get right into it. So tell us about Caroline. Who is she? What has she done? What's going on?
So I'll just kind of start with her beginning. So her parents...
The parents met up at a bar and then Led Zeppelin was playing in the background. No, it's not the beginning you want to start?
No.
All right.
So her parents, they got married and then they just, I think they were somewhere like on like the East Coast, like Ohio or somewhere around there, and then, or Michigan maybe, and they just kind of took off and they drove to Alaska. So this was like 1974, and then they just stayed.
The parents did.
Yeah.
Okay. While
so,
she was a baby?
No, she wasn't even born. Okay. None of her siblings
so we are going way back.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So
should we send the kids out of the room? Is that
No.
Okay.
I don't think we're gonna go that way back. So they were really super outdoors people. They were always outdoors, and I think that's what drew them to Alaska. And so they did all kinds of crazy stuff, and they were always like an outdoor family. So they hiked up. It's the biggest mountain in North America, which is Denali, which is in Alaska.
Oh, really?
So they hiked up that.
Not in the Rockies or anything like that, eh? Interesting. Or is that part of it? Does it go all the way up?
I don't know if you would if it's considered part of the Rocky Range. I'm not sure. Anyway, also it was called Mount McKinley before they changed the name to Denali. But anyway, so they would always, as like a family, go out and do hiking and all that kind of stuff. But she was a total bookworm, and so she just always wanted to be like reading her book, and she would like make deals with her parents, like, oh, go on a or they would be like, okay, you can read for an hour, but then we have to go outside and go for a walk or something.
Right.
So
how many siblings did she have?
So she had a sister and a brother.
Okay.
So
she's first, second, third?
I think she is in the middle.
Okay.
Yeah. And so she really did really well in math and in science. And so a couple quotes from the book. She says, only later would I realize that books were my gateway to learning, but that someday I would need to discover things on my own. So, because books only get you so far, like you have to go out into the world.
Right.
And yes. And then she said,
the books that we read.
Yeah. And so the other thing she said that I related to so much was she says she was really good in science, but she dreaded coming up with hypotheses and designing experiments because she was just like, there was no instructions to follow. And so coming up with that was difficult for her, which is like, I love science too, but that always was hard for me as well, was coming up with those type of things.
Well, there's a specific set of guidelines in order for how you test a hypothesis and stuff like that. But anyways, this isn't a science show, so we won't get into that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So she ends up getting a scholarship to the University of Arizona. And so like, wow, big change from Alaska to Arizona.
Right. Go from cold to
brutally hot.
Yep.
And so she has a really difficult time trying to like get into like university life and like the social stuff she's not really into. And then even the huge classes and the biology classes, because that's what she decided to do, was to go into biology.
Yep.
But it just like wasn't really like, it just wasn't awesome.
Yep.
So she ends up taking like a conservation ecology class, and she finally gets a professor who just completely inspires her.
Yeah.
And so this guy like takes them out into the Sonoran Desert, and he just teaches them and shows them like everything, and like more like curiosity and wonder, and like, you know, kind of like out of the books into you're actually living and doing science.
So you're saying that there's a professor that actually takes students outside the classroom?
Yeah.
And like, is this a field trip, or what kind of course is this?
Yeah, well, it's like some sort of conservation biology course.
And that's what they do. They just go out and
I'm sure
stuff,
they do like I'm sure they did like in class stuff as well, but it was like a lot of like they would sleep out overnight and look at different things.
Oh, that's interesting.
Cactuses and stuff like that. So yeah, and then so
they just look. We're going to go look at cactuses, cacti.
Well,
right?
because there was this one cactus where it would only bloom like at night. At one,
or
and only like
one.
Yeah, so they would go out and do kind of cool stuff like that.
Yeah.
So this is where she kind of falls in love with field work and actually observing things and that sort of thing. So in the summers in between university, she goes back to Alaska and she does like a bunch of different field biology type jobs. And so she says, I began to understand how ecological questions I'd learned about in school were embedded in the muddy, messy realities of fieldwork, and I loved it. So, and then even when she was in Arizona during school, she'd also find field work that like to help out and that sort of thing.
Sure.
So
yeah, I mean, there's always like conservation authorities and different types of consulting companies that will happily take on volunteer work or whatever, because really, I mean, not nobody, but not very people like to do field work, right? Because it's just muddy and it's hot and it's wet or it's cold.
Especially in Alaska, right? Yeah. Like she was like, they were getting birds, and they were like, there were a particular type of bird called a kittiwake. And so they would have to go and like look at the different chicks and measure them and all that sort of thing. So it's like, that's a lot of work. So then she meets her husband, Pat. She meets him because he's her sister's roommate when her sister is in college. And her sister is in college in a little town called Bellingham, which is in Washington State. So, right. Just so you know, because you have a bad geography stuff.
Well, I'm not American, so I don't really know it too much. But
so it's just right underneath
California.
BC.
Or California.
This is why I'm telling you.
Well, no, I know, because it doesn't go Washington, then Oregon, and then California or something like that.
Yeah. So they kind of start like a long distance relationship, and he's kind of like a different person than she's met before. Like he's pretty reserved and quiet, but he's like very confident in the outdoors. And so one thing she finds out about him is he's originally from New York, but in between high school and college, he goes to Alaska because he's just always wanted to go to Alaska. And so he took a year off and he went to Alaska, kind of found this like random plot of land that was really remote, and he ends up just building his own like cabin in the woods. Like he doesn't buy the land. He like talks to kind of neighbors, and they're like, oh yeah, no one goes there, so go ahead and do what you want to do.
Because isn't that like crown land where you can just
I don't know.
Take up residence in it.
Yeah, I don't know. So he just builds this cabin there. No one bothers him, of course. He just builds his cabin because, I mean, it's the freaking backcountry Alaska. No one's.
But is it like he builds cabin just like out of like logs and stuff, like a log cabin, just out of? So he's,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, there's some really amazing YouTube videos of people that have built like just actual log cabins where they're cutting down trees and like putting the logs together, and they use like moss and whatever to be like the mortar in
exactly
between.
What he
all
did.
That stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
It's really, really cool.
Yeah. So she finds this, obviously, this is like right up her alley, this guy, right? And so their first big adventure that they took is they drove to.
So they met.
Yeah.
They met where? At her sister's?
Yeah. So they were all kind of like living in a house together. So he was like a housemate
of her sister,
and that's how they met.
All right.
Yeah. So, so their first big adventure was in the Yukon. So they drove to this little town called Mayo, and then they hiked.
They as in all three of them?
No, just the two, just a couple. Yeah.
So they're like a couple.
They're a couple at this point. Yeah.
Right.
So they hike to the headwaters of this river called Wind River in the Yukon.
Well, so hang on a second.
Yeah.
So he built this log cabin way back in between high school and whatever. Is it like, does he still go back to it every once in a while?
Well, I don't know. They went back to it once so he could show her, and like she loves it. Like she's like, this is amazing. Does anybody
stay there? Does like, is that a place where kids will go?
I don't know. I don't
whatever,
know. I don't know. There's not really much about it after that.
Yeah, interesting.
So
we should go find it.
I know.
Let's go find this remote cabin.
I know. So their first big adventure is they drive to this town Mayo in the Yukon, and then they hike. It takes them about 3 weeks to the headwaters of Wind River, and then
that's from the movie.
I know. And then they build a canoe, and then sail this canoe down the river back to their car. Yeah. So
build a canoe.
They just built a canoe.
How long was this trip?
Like a couple months.
Oh, okay, yeah. So it's not like because you're building a canoe.
Yeah.
Or were they just tenting it up somewhere?
Yep. And so.
Sounds like your type of adventure.
So. But during this trip, it's just like really kind of solidifies like their relationship, because you go through some hardships, obviously, and some struggle, but just also made them realize like anything was possible. Yeah. So while they were on this trip, they kind of sketched out the idea of doing a much larger scale trip like this. Like, if we can do this, then we can, go across like a big part of the northern continent, right? Like do like a really big adventure type thing. So, and they called it like the Trans North America is kind of what they named it. And they had, they had like a file where they would put ideas and stuff in and that kind of thing. But unfortunately they have to go back to reality. Pat goes back to school, and she's graduated at this point, and she goes back to just kind of being a tech in Alaska. And then
because I need money.
Yeah. And then so it's like
the reality of some situations.
And so it's pretty rough, like the long distance. So eventually she moves to Bellingham and she starts grad school, and they ended up moving in together, and they just stay in this harbor on a boat, on like a boathouse that they rent.
That's what I've always said that we should do. I know. That's what I said. So are we doing that? Let's just buy a boat.
Anyway.
And live in the boat.
Well, they don't buy it. They're just renting it. And that's just their house.
Well, I'd rather buy one.
Anyway. So
let's buy one and let's go sail. Screw this book. Let's go.
Okay. So they both finish their degrees, and so they are going back to Alaska. They do like a bunch of like kind of field work and whatever, or she does, and he's kind of like her assistant. And so they take a little bit of a like a little vacation type thing, and so they're kayaking around like Haines, Alaska, because Haines, Alaska is like right on the water. Alaska's really weird how the state is set up, because you see there's like that big chunk of it up here, but then there's like a little piece of it.
Sure.
It's weird. And so Haines is on this little piece that's kind of like attached to British Columbia. So anyway, I'll show you a picture in a minute of the map. So before they go on this kayak, they see this piece of property in like the realtor office or something, and they're like really kind of intrigued about this property, and they had kind of been looking for like a place to kind of set up roots, kind of like a home base. And so they were like, oh well, when we're kayaking, like we'll take a quick look at it, see what it is.
Yeah.
And so
and then they fall in love with it.
They fall in love with it. Yeah, they fall in love with it, and then they build this. They buy it. They build this amazing off-grid cabin. This thing was so beautiful, and their property is so beautiful. It looks out over the ocean, like this little sound, and there's like whales and sea lions and all kinds of shit, and then mountains on the other side. Like it's gorgeous.
Where did you have a picture? Can I see this?
Yeah. So, so this cabin is.
Did they build an off-grid cabin, or is it like a house? This is like their house.
It's
Is this it right here?
Yeah. So that's it.
Oh well, that's huge. That's like a house. So I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
Let's just see if I could put that to the camera there.
Yeah.
That's the house there.
And then I'll show you what their view is from the house.
Well, I mean,
because it's stunning. Like, so that's the top one. That's like their their beach. Yeah.
This is like what I was telling you about that person's YouTube channel, where they live in the northernmost remote city like in the world. And
this is the one in Norway?
Yeah, well, but it's like on this island, right? But it's owned by Denmark. So it's Danish, I guess.
Okay.
Here's the picture of that. But yeah, it's like, you know, here's the glaciers on this side and the mountains on that side, and it's just crazy.
Yeah.
It's just beautiful.
Yeah. So they don't live there full time because the winters are crazy and they need to make money. So they live in Anchorage part time, and her parents are in Anchorage, and then they live like.
Do they own like another house then?
I think it's just like an apartment that they kind of rented there. So, she starts her PhD.
How long did it take them to build that?
I don't know. Shouldn't say.
Looks like, I mean, if they're just literally just them two working out the land, that would take a while.
It would take a while. So she starts her PhD, and what happens is she kind of becomes obsessed with, her main focus is birds. And so what she has observed is these chickadees up there were having these like crazy beak deformities. And so she became obsessed about trying to figure out why these deformities are happening, because then answering that question, because probably it's like due to some environmental thing, like is it a toxin, like what's going on here. And so she's like, you know, hopefully by answering that question it can tell us something about our environment and about what we're doing and that sort of thing. The problem is that there's almost no information about beak formation, and so she has to like go all the way back and do all kinds of research about just birds' beaks in general. And so
and how they develop within not within the womb, but within the egg. And is that what you mean? Like there's no...
Well, yeah, probably. But more even just like how, like the beak itself. So she has to, unfortunately, she catches these chickadees and then she has to kill them so that she can look at their beaks and how, what are they made of even? Like they only really knew they were made of keratin and like that's it, right? So, there was like, nothing was known about like the structure, the tissues, how it grows, any of those things. So then it's hard to make a hypothesis about how it's going to get disfigured in the first place. So she had to go back and just do this like basic research about the beaks before she could then do the deformities and stuff like that. So the problem was like it was all lab work, and she like grew to hate it. I don't think that's like uncommon though for people in a PhD to eventually like not like the work. Do you know what I mean? I think everybody kind of get burnt out about that one question and that one thing.
Well, it can be. It depends on the type of question, depends on your passion towards it. And yeah, I mean, if you're somebody that likes to go outside and do field work or what have you, and, you know, do your experimentation, and your data gathering outdoors, if you're just inside all the time, then you're going to get stir crazy. You're just going to be sitting under a microscope or whatever all day. And then, I could see that.
Yeah. So
that's why you have to understand, if you're going to do a PhD, I mean, you have a certain amount of control over what it is that you're going to want to study and how you're going to study as well too. So maybe she made a mistake in terms of how she was formulating, you know, her thesis.
Yeah.
But anyways.
Yeah. So she says she had forgotten what it meant, not only in her mind, but in her heart, to be a scientist. And so I think for her, being a scientist was more about going out and being the observation part of it and like actually being there on the ground.
Well, I mean, a scientist is a scientist, but I guess some people can have different passions for what parts of science really kind of speaks to them, I guess.
Absolutely. And so she said to kind of, this is where it had been years since they had talked about this big trip. And so this is where she couldn't stop thinking about it. And so she said, I needed a crash course outdoors to remind myself that life is not merely a tally of days, that what really matters cannot be quantified. So she was just like, I just need to like a reset almost and just go out and do this. And so Pat was kind of in the same situation. He at this point had opened up a design and build business. And so he was building like these beautiful homes for other people, but it was just like...
Is it like an architect then? Or,
I think so. Yeah.
Pretty good handyman?
Yes,
because that picture there is not just some guy who threw some lines together and doesn't really know what they're doing, right? So
yeah. So
it's like a tradesman or a construction guy or something.
Yeah. So so that's what they started talking about their trip and started like kind of planning out this trip. And then also at the same time, one of her aunts had passed away. One of her dad's like very close friends had also passed away. And then her dad was diagnosed with Parkinson's. So it's like she's kind of seeing like, you know, if we're going to do something, we need to do it
while you can.
Yep. And not only that, like I think she also kind of recognized that it's almost like, because they're 33 at this point, and so she's kind of like recognizing, well, we're gonna eventually have to have like, you know, like real jobs. I can't be a grad student forever, kind of thing. And you know, are we gonna start a family? Like what are we gonna do? This is almost kind of like the last kind of like hurrah for us, almost, in a way. So
excuse me. Well, that's interesting. I don't particularly agree with that, in the sense that,
well, she didn't come out and say that, but that's kind of like how it feels.
Yeah, but I mean, just because you have a family doesn't mean you can't do things, right? So,
well, of course.
But I do think, I think a lot of people think that, you know, like, oh, well, I have a family now, so I can't do all those things that I could have done when I didn't. But I certainly don't feel constricted by that. So, yeah, all the things that we're thinking about doing are things that we want to do. Mm-hmm. Just because we have kids is not going to stop us from doing that. So. Yeah.
So she says, planning a 4,000-mile trip through the wilderness wasn't a logical response to becoming disillusioned by research or facing my dad's illness, but logic was the last thing I needed. So, yeah, so then they start planning out this trip, and they want to do it completely under their own steam. They don't really want to go on like actual roads or trails. They just kind of want to do their own thing. Mm-hmm. So they plan out this trip of how they're going to go. And so the first part of the trip is paddling up the coast of British Columbia up to their property in Alaska. Mm-hmm. That's the first part of their trip. And so they can't seem to find these expedition style rowboats, and it's really similar to like a scull. Like they have these big, like that Silicon Lawman road. So they have these big long paddles, and they kind of like, you have to row them kind of like that, I guess. Yeah. So they can't find them to buy. So Pat builds them. Yeah. And it's unreal because it's like, how do you even build a boat like that? And
well, somebody does, obviously. But
yeah. So, but to do it. So anyways,
out of wood, I would imagine, or
yeah, I don't know. Like they're pretty incredible looking to me. I don't know. I don't know what they're made of, but yeah, you can see there's a couple pictures of them. So he's building the boats. She's like getting like all the logistics taken care of. So they're obviously, it's a big deal to do all this stuff. Yeah. So their whole plan is like, they're going to row, they're going to ski, they're going to hike, they're going to have pack rafts. Like they're going to do all these different things.
And they're just going to bring all of this stuff and carry it the whole way through?
No. So they pack. It's really similar to Cheryl Strait in the Wild, where they send stuff to themselves and then they'll pick it up on the way. They organize a couple like drops as well.
Pick some stuff off, drop some stuff off.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. So yeah, and what's really cool is, so like throughout this whole book, like the birds are, it's always like this theme of, she's always talking about like all of the different birds as they go on this trip that they're seeing. She talks about some of their behaviors and some of their like migrations, and you can just tell like the passion that she feels for observing these birds in the wild. Yeah. And I think that's one of the reasons why I like this book so much, is because it was really interesting. And, you know, I have a kind of a thing for birds right now. So.
Yeah. For whatever reason. Birds are kind of cool. They come really in and they eat the food, they sing. Yeah. They just look cool.
They look cool. So, and I don't know, they always look so curious and cute and stuff. So.
But also really timid. Oh, sorry, my throat is killing me.
That's weird. You have COVID?
What? No, I just have a frog in my throat.
Anyways. So they leave. What's kind of interesting is they leave from the same harbor that they had rented the boat in that they lived in while they were in Bellingham in Washington. Yeah, so they leave from the same harbor. So they leave March 17th, and they just start rowing. And it's like it's like the seas are, that's like the weather's not great, and it's cold still at that time.
Well, so it's Alaska. Yeah. It's going to be cold all the time.
And so she has like, it really reminded me like of our trip in a way, because when we started, it was so fucking cold, even though it was May. Yeah. And she said, I had imagined that the urge to move would take hold as soon as we hit the water. Instead, I've already started to question the reasons for this journey. The enormity of our goal is dizzying. Yeah. So
you got to break it up into little legs, I guess, you know? Yeah. Little parts at a time.
Yeah. And so her sister, as they were planning the trip, her sister got pregnant. And so she was, you know, kind of sad that she wasn't going to be able to be there for her sister during the birth, but she talks to her sister, and she compares like a little bit to like what her sister's kind of new journey to to like what they're doing in their journey, like the difficulties and stuff like that. So that was kind of interesting.
What do you mean? Sorry, what are you saying? What's the sister doing?
Because she had like having a newborn, and so
just that journey
of having a newborn and being a mother and everything. So she also at one point they get to this passage where how the tides are. They have to time it very carefully how they get through this passage, because there's like nowhere to get the boats off.
These are like all through the islands around British Columbia.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So they have to be really careful about when they go through this one particular passage. And she's just like, she's not sure, and she just has a bad feeling. And so she talks about the difference between her danger radar and Pat's, because Pat's just like, oh yeah, we'll be fine. And they get in, and she's like, no, we got to turn around. I just have a really bad feeling. Yeah. And it's a good thing they did turn around, because it was like 20-foot wind, like waves in there. It was really rough. And so, what does she say? Yeah. So he just has like a different sense of danger radar. And I guess what was interesting about it to me is because I think that's very similar for us. Like,
I don't know. I don't do things that are that are stupid.
No.
I see things that are dangerous, and I would be like, yeah, no. I don't know. I think you overestimate my craziness in a way. Like I see I don't know. I'm pretty conservative when it comes to things that are dangerous, I think. Like I'll try things, right? Yeah. But I'm not going to do with anything that's stupid.
Yeah.
Like I've never.
But even like the trip, like I think we just have different comfort levels with risk and that sort of thing.
But that's risk and danger are two different things.
I guess
and say like, in a way, like, oh well, I might want to take a risk of like, hey, let's take a year to just travel.
Yeah.
That's different than like, hey, let's go scale an ice flow.
Yeah, that's fair.
I've never done before, and has a higher chance of death. Or let's go, swimming through an underground cave that I've never been at, but yet there's high tides and whatever I could drown. It's like, do you know what I mean? Like that's the difference between, I'm not willing to take a lot of those dangerous things, right? To do dangerous things.
That's fair.
Like also go on the trip, but like let's plan the best route. And if it looks dangerous, then let's just sit and wait for the storm to pass in a sense, right?
Yeah, that's fair.
Defend myself on that one.
So then at one point they're just kind of sitting on a beach, and they hear this like weird sound, and they go out to the beach and they see this incredible sight. I don't know if you know that this is a thing, but humpback whales, they do this thing called bubble netting to catch fish. And so they'll be in a group and they'll like blow bubbles, and it kind of nets the fish, and then they'll go in and they'll eat the fish.
Humpback whales?
Yeah.
Humpback whales.
Yeah.
So they're carnivores?
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
But I do know like there were certain things with dolphins I think too, that they make these echo sounds or whatever, or screeches, so they just.
But they also do that with the bubble netting type
right,
thing
yeah.
too.
So they surround their prey.
It's really cool when you see it, and so, but it's like rare to see it, and this is what they see is these humpback whales and this bubble netting. So it's so cool. So they finally make it to their log cabin, and they've paddled nearly 1,200 kilometers, and that took them about 2 months to do. So just going all across there, right? Yeah, just so nuts. And so they stop off at their cabin for a while.
So they take some 2 months. What are they doing for food?
Like dehydrated stuff.
But did they just carry literally 2 months worth of food all in one go?
Sounds like it, because it's in their boats, so I think it's easier.
They each have their own boat then? Yeah. So they're carrying lots of food then, I would imagine.
Yeah. So.
And what are they doing in terms of keeping it safe for bears?
They didn't talk about that.
And they didn't talk about any logistics of.
Not at this point.
Yeah.
No,
okay.
Yeah. So. So then they make it to their place. They kind of have a little bit of a rest at their place, and then they switch out their gear. So they switch out now to pack rafts. So they're like inflatable ones, and then they have the paddles that easily kind of, you take the paddle part off, it's like a screw in, and then, so it's easier to stow and to carry, and lighter to carry. And so they paddle across their canal to the other side, and then they see more humpback whales. They see this, and this is like where they lit like their house, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, this is
right.
Like
so you're saying they're paddling, so like I'm not getting the context as to where they are, and you're talking about their house, like they're at home.
Okay, So
I just don't know where they are.
So they paddle. So the property that they bought, and then the house that they built.
Yeah.
It's right on like the.
Right. That's what I'm saying. That first 1,200 kilometers, you said, and then they're home. They're at the property.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
and then they're paddling somewhere else.
Yeah. So then they have to paddle across the canal.
The canal. Like I just don't know what that.
Okay.
You know. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Okay. I just don't know where they are.
Yeah. So here,
you know.
So they're paddling up here. So then they get. Do you see what I'm saying? Yeah. Well, so where they are, they're on one side of the ocean, and so they have to paddle across it to get to the mainland.
Okay.
So then they get there, and then that's the rest of their trip. Then is that they go. So does that make more sense?
Yeah. Well, I just don't understand why you're saying like they're home. Like I don't understand like how long they're home for, or like
they're
this canal at their house. Like I don't know. I just don't understand.
Okay. So
I just don't know where that's all.
So their home that they like the property that they bought, they can paddle to it. They paddle to it from there.
I get
paddle
that.
To it. And so it's on one side of this. Like it's called a canal. It's just like open ocean, but it's like a smaller swath of it because their home is here, and then like mainland Alaska is on this side of it.
They live on an island.
No, it's weird. It's just this canal that goes up. It's just the water that goes up like inside of it. And so they have to paddle across that canal to get to the other side.
Okay.
And then
continue on. Okay. So they're just paddling up a river.
But but that's just where their house is. So they're just there. It's a stopover point for them. Okay. That's it. So. And
that's where they get these paddles that can unscrew.
Yeah, yeah. So they stop and like they resupply and they re-gear up because at this point they also have to get their skis and like climbing harnesses. So they get their food and all of this stuff. And so these are these ones are like pack raft. They're called pack rafts. Okay. And so you blow them up, and so then they're easier to carry. Right, is the point of these ones. And so you can roll them up and attach them to your backpack. And then the thing
like a stand-up paddleboard, almost.
No, not at all. It's like an actual boat you sit in. It's like a blow-up.
Well, no, I just mean in terms because those things you can inflate them and you could roll them up and then put them in your backpack.
Yeah, okay.
That's all I mean.
Oh, okay, that's
not like an actual stand-up paddleboard.
Yeah. So and then like the point with the paddles is instead of just carrying this giant wooden paddle,
they have to be longer. They're not just your regular canoe paddles.
No, they are. You're not listening.
I am listening. You said before they had those things that had the bigger rolls. Yes. They're larger than your standard typical canoe.
But they're not using those ones for the pack rafts.
All right. I'm listening.
So the ones for the pack rafts, they're just like plastic. You can buy them at Canadian Tire.
I know.
They're just like little plastic paddle. But the point is you can make them smaller. So then again, it's easy. Like you unscrew them and then put them in your pack.
Yeah. So I got it.
Okay.
I got it.
You're just asking weird questions. So then they have to hike up this mountain pass, and of course there's all kinds of like risk of avalanches and all this stuff because of the snow is starting to melt and all this stuff, but they have to climb up this crazy steep pass, and then they ski down into the Yukon basically. So
they climb up a mountain and ski down a mountain.
Yeah.
Like is it an actual mountain?
It's a mountain pass. Yeah. Yeah, there's a picture.
So then they're going through like actually defined trails? Or?
Yeah. Well, no. So like this is their property, and these were the rowboats that they rowed. Yeah. So they're gonna exchange those for the pack rafts.
The mountain pass would be like in between.
And that's the mountain pass, and they can see that. So they have to paddle across this little canal. It's called Lynn Canal, and then they go across. They go up and across that pass. Yeah. So, and then those are the rafts to give you an idea of what they look like.
It's crazy.
So, yeah. So at the same time while they were at home, before they left, she had applied for a National Science Foundation fellowship so she could do like post-grad work more on these bird beats.
So she did finish her PhD.
Yeah, she did before they left.
Yeah. Ask, okay. Even though she didn't like it, she
finished it. And she finished it. And so she had also at the same time applied for a job with like I think the government of Alaska or something like that, doing more research as well. And so
she didn't want to go into academia.
Well, the fellowship would have been to academia, yeah.
Like a postdoc almost.
Yep, I think so. And so she didn't expect to get any money because like it's like for bird beaks, and she's like, I didn't expect it, but she did. She got it, and so the whole time, like, she's having to think about. But the thing is it would be they would have to move to Princeton because it was at Princeton University, and so she's trying to figure out, well,
where is Princeton?
Somewhere on the East Coast.
Yeah, down.
Yeah,
I'm just curious.
Yeah,
hear about it.
Yeah, I'm not sure where it is. If it's New York or somewhere around there. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, no idea. No clue.
Yeah, so it's just like this dichotomy of her trying to have to figure out.
So she gets this grant before they even take off on this trip?
No. She finds out when they have their stopover at their home. She's able to check email and stuff like that. Yeah. So
they don't even bring a phone with them or anything like that? Is what you're saying?
Yep, they have a phone. Yep. They have like I think it's, I don't know what type of phone it is, but they have something. But
no email access then, I guess, throughout the trip.
Yeah, unless like their stopovers and that sort of thing. So, one interesting thing too, and this is again why I love this book, is because she writes it as like a scientist, but also someone who just clearly just has this love of nature and birds. And she says, out here I am half scientist, half disciple. I've left the laboratory far behind, and with it the need to quantify and contain. In its place, I've reconnected with the simple act of observation. These were the tenets of the earliest naturalists. What drew me to research was not the rigor of statistics or the mystery of what lies within an organism's genetic code. It was the birds themselves. So it's like she's kind of like getting back to what drew her and made her passionate about science in the first place, was just observing the natural world. And then she goes on to talk about like how we have all this like new technology that we're using in science, but it's also separating us in a way from science, from that basic observation and being able to just look at things and observe them. And so it reminds me, because when I was working for Dave and picking the bugs, and so I'd pick the bugs and then he would identify them. Yeah. And I remember asking him, because my background was molecular biology, and I remember asking him, well, like, how much longer do you think this is going to be, like, the dichotomous key is going to be used for identifying bugs, when now we can just sequence their DNA and identify them? And so something I think is lost when we don't use that anymore and use all the technology all the time.
Back up. What was his answer?
Oh, he's like, oh, no, I don't think so.
Yeah.
But I think, I don't think
so either. Taxonomists are still a thing.
Yeah. So, but I guess and I also compare to, like, you know, some people are just still are so very reliant on GPS and don't know how to, like, use a map, right? And so I think it's like we need to maintain and keep some of the old school stuff while using technology at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, I could see that it sounds like a romanticism of the past, where it's like when new technology comes in, you're always like, well, maybe it was better back in the day. And I get that, but I wouldn't knock so much science in the way that, like, people are using tools and technologies that take them away from science. I think that's just a matter of personal opinion, and I get what she's saying, because it is nice to just go in nature and just observe or what have you. You know, you think of back in the day of Darwin, right? You know, he goes to this island and he sees all these things that have never been experienced before, and he's like, wow, he comes up with his, you know, the theory of evolution from just observing, right? He didn't have any fancy equipment or whatever. So I think there is something to be said about, you know, trying to be one with nature or whatever. But that being said, I mean, having modern equipment too can be very helpful. It depends on what you're doing, right? It's a pretty you know, I mean, we talk about this in all kinds of different things of basically, are you like a purist, or are you somebody, you know, like getting back to our good friend Mount Everest, you know, like, oh, did you climb with oxygen? Well, you didn't really do it, right? So you use technology to help you out, right? So then it's like, what amount of technology is sufficient enough for you to say that, yes, you're adequately observing or doing science? So, but I think if you're going out into nature, whether it's to do science or just enjoy it, as long as you feel connected to it,
that's
you
true.
know, whether that's a spiritual connection or whatever, and you just feel as if like you're in the moment and you're experiencing it and you're true to yourself or whatever, then whatever works for you. I think anyways, right? So
so there's all these different, like, this danger of the avalanches, and so they have to figure out, because they're going places where there's no trails, and so there's one point where they just don't feel safe in this one area, so they have to find another route. And she says there are no right answers, only better or worse choices. We have no guidebook to follow, no avalanche forecast, no one to ask for route information. And I feel like this is like a really like a metaphor for her life at the same time. Like you have to make it up as you go. And I think much of life is like this, right? There is no guidebook for what to do. And so you just have to make the best choice you can.
That's for everyone. I don't know if anyone has a guidebook.
Exactly. So the other thing she talks about is...
But that being said, I'm sure she would have loved to have some type of device that would tell her if there was an ambulance coming.
Well, yes, yes, of course.
Oh, I didn't have anything, but if I did, I'd use it.
Yeah. So she also talks kind of a little bit about like almost like the division of labor between like her and Pat. And even just like on a day-to-day basis of like how they're doing kind of the chores of packing up and everything. Yeah. So they have like the last person to wake up has to put the tent away, obviously. And while the first person up makes breakfast. Mm-hmm. And so there's one morning where she's the last person up and it's like so cold, like it's so cold because you're in the mountains. So like her hands are out cold. And so he sees how tired she is, so he offers to do it for her. And she says, out here generosity comes not in the form of material things, but the gentle lessening of each other's daily burden. Yeah. And so it's like those gifts of that like acts of service are so important. And I think that's part of like for some women, it's just like if you could just do the dishes, like that is the sexiest thing alive. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Like those little acts of service are so important. And it's those little things that mean everything.
It's not just for women too. I mean, everyone appreciates when somebody does something for them because they realize that it just takes out that burden. Yeah. Yeah. It's funny because when we went our trip too, it's I totally get that whole like defining who's doing what or whatever. Yes. But at the same time, I like how what happened to us is that we just kind of organically developed who was going to be doing what. And, you know, it's like the whole like, well, whoever wakes up earliest makes the breakfast. It's like, well, what if one person is just better at making the breakfast? Maybe you should just be consistent in that one person. Yeah. And then everyone kind of gets good at their own thing. Well,
I think that's kind of how it developed for them too. Yeah. But it was just, I just liked that one thought. And the other thing,
but that's the thing is like to not be so rigid and you're doing this, you're doing that. And then if that person's tired, then it's like, well, I can't do it because that's your job. And
yeah. Of course.
See how things play out.
And then this kind of, again, this kind of same idea comes back later on in their trip where Pat is carrying more food than typical. So they have a kind of like a ratio of how much each person carries. And so he takes even more from her because he can see she's struggling a little bit at this one point, and because they're hiking. And then she gets like mad at him because she's like, I want to do it on my own. Like, this is my trip. I want to say that I did it. Like I did all these things, but it's just, and it's interesting to me because it parallels sometimes, I think, like for us and with, you know, you are the one that brings in the income. Mm-hmm. And I'm the one that does all the kid stuff. Mm-hmm. And so it's that kind of understanding that, you know, she did all the logistic stuff and all the planning and planned all the food drops and did all this stuff. So it's like you are doing it, but it's different, and everything, you have to value it all of the same way. Right. And she eventually is fine. Like she gets it, and she gets to that point of understanding that. But it's interesting. It sounds like,
I mean, I think it's really stupid. You make a really good point, is that like there's so much to do with doing accomplishing a specific task than like one thing or just like the physical thing. And I don't know what it is where it's like, oh well, the only gauge of whether you're going to be successful at a task is the physical strength of it, and comparing a man versus a woman as well too. It's like, well, there's differences in genetics. Men are typically stronger, and if he can carry more and you carry less, that doesn't make you any less of a person. You are who you are. And like you said, there's other things that you've done to do the trip other than just carrying a heavy load and breaking your back. For what reason? Exactly. You plan the whole damn thing. You think this guy is going to be able to do that if you weren't there to plan the whole thing? Yeah. It's a disaster. We go on our trip, I might be carrying the canoe and all this heavy stuff or whatever, but guess what? If you're not there to help plan the whole damn thing, plan exactly where we're going to go, this trip is a disaster and it's never going to function. Yes. So it's like, I'm dependent on you just as much as you're dependent on me. Yeah. And that's what it means to be part of a team, is everyone has their own strengths and weaknesses, and you come together to create something that you cannot do on your own. Mm-hmm. So it's really unfortunate. Not her, but just I'm talking like society in general where it's like the only way especially nowadays, like the only way a woman can be seen to be successful or whatever is to compare themselves to how a man would do. And it's like, oh, for a woman to be successful, they have to do everything a man is, right? So it's like, well, I got to be the top CEO. I got to, be physically strong or whatever. It's like, that's not what makes a woman strong,
and that's
right?
patriarchy in and of itself.
Well, exactly. Trying to turn women into men or putting the successes of what a man has to like, that's what women have to do to get to success. No. And then whatever happened to being an amazing mother, being an amazing wife, raising kids, training the next generation, having, doing all that stuff, which is critical to a society. For me, like women are like the pillars of society and keeping men in check and keeping families together and raising families and doing all those kinds of things other than just the making money and doing a career stuff. To me, that's not I do it because I have to. Like I have to have a job or a career. I don't want that. I want a family. I want to teach my kids, raise my kids, pass on my knowledge, all that kind of stuff. And it all stems with a family. And I think for women to be able to do that, it's a privilege and it's a gift and it's a beautiful, wonderful thing. And it should be celebrated as something that is, I would say, even more valuable than being a successful career person or whatever. Because I don't know. Anyways, a little bit of an aside there, but I'll just throw that out there.
Yeah, but that's what I wanted to get to, because it just really made me think of that. And it's like, you have to value it needs to be like, you just need to value what you're capable of and what you're able to contribute, and contribute whatever you can.
Yep.
And it's an equal contribution. So
well, we even said, we were watching just with the kids, just Apollo 13 the other day, and there was just one little quote in the movie. I don't remember exactly what it was, but he's like, from the astronaut themselves to the person that sweeps the floor on NASA, we're all part of the team that got people to the moon,
space,
right? It's everyone, and everyone has their own contribution. And you don't minimize that contribution by saying, oh, well,
I'm just this or I'm just that.
And like saying like, oh, well, I could only carry 50 pounds and what's the name, Dan or whatever. What's the guy? Pat. Well, he carried 100 pounds. So I didn't really do the trip. It's like, fuck, don't sell yourself short. Exactly. Like that's not what it's about.
Exactly.
So anyways.
So she does get there. Like she does eventually get there, but it's just, it was interesting.
Yeah.
So they finally get to Whitehorse in the Yukon, and they just gorge themselves on food there. 'Cause it's kind of like,
so hang on. So they went up to British Columbia, and then they get to the house in Alaska. And then from Alaska, then they're going east then towards Yukon.
Well, north.
Let me see.
They're going north this entire time.
So where's the Alaska property line?
Yeah, that's what I'm telling you.
I guess there's a little shoe right here, because that's Alaska.
Yeah.
So you're still going north, but you just kind of cross into the Yukon.
Into the Yukon.
And then the line is just kind of right here.
Yeah.
And so they live in this little part here.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
So so they get to Whitehorse, and then,
oh man, I want to go there so bad.
I know. So, and then this part for them is kind of like a little bit of a break, because they're just going to kind of canoe down. They're going to rent a canoe and just kind of canoe down the Yukon River. And so,
when you say down, where does it flow? Does it flow all the way up to the Arctic? Yeah. It does, eh?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so it's kind of a little bit of a break, because it's like an easy paddle, and there's tons of people, like not tons, but like tourists. It's tourist season. It's in this like summertime at this point. Yeah. So there's lots of people. And so it's just cheap to just rent a canoe, and it's faster than their pack rafts. So they still have their pack rafts, but it's just faster to have like just rent a canoe and just do it. So,
and when people do this, what's the river called again?
Yukon River.
The Yukon River. Is it all like campgrounds, or
I think there's probably
like parks
some
kind of thing.
Probably some, yeah.
But people just canoe it down and just find places to camp or whatever, because it's, I mean, even though it's popular, it's still pretty remote.
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm saying. Like popular, I think, is a relative term up there.
Right.
Yeah. So, but the fun part of this is when they're canoeing down from Whitehorse to Dawson City, and so
Gold Rush. Once
they hit Dawson City, her parents are going to meet them there, which is really cool. So, and then they will have they'll shuttle some of their skis and stuff. They don't need their skis now, so they'll shuttle that back to Anchorage. But then they also give them like a resupply there, and then also a resupply at another spot like further north for them. So she talks a little bit about her parents, and even though her dad has Parkinson's, like just like how she talks about them and how they are in their retirement is just like, that's how I want us to be. Like they're just up for anything. So because driving from Anchorage to Dawson City, it's pretty far, like it's hundreds of kilometers, but they're just like, oh yeah, we'll do it. Like that's cool. They're just like up for anything, and they're always like super active and stuff like that. And just it's like,
that's too bad though. Like
I know,
brain disease, illness.
I know. Yeah. So she's like always up for an adventure. My parents are almost caricatures of good sports. They're game to hike up a mountain or tour on a crowded bus. So retirement for them is less about slowing down than speeding up. So it's like, I hear that and I'm just like, yeah, like that's how I want us to be too. Like always game for something and always ready to have fun.
Dude, you mean you don't just want to sit on the couch and watch Price is Right all day?
Fuck that.
I don't know. That's fun.
So
watch the TV.
Yeah.
Really loud and complain at the get a broom and complain at the kids playing hockey on the street.
Yeah. No.
Get off my porch.
So then the next part they go is they're hiking across what's called the Tombstone Mountains. And so they haven't really done much hiking at this point because it's always been basically in a boat or skiing or
on a mountain.
Yes. And so it's rough going for a little bit because they have to like have blisters, and blisters move to calluses and all that kind of stuff. So it's a little bit.
Their feet aren't really strong for that.
Yeah, and then it's rough going through.
Did they do any training beforehand?
No, I don't think so. So even the
maybe next time.
Yeah. So and like even like it's a rough. There's no trail, so they're like pushing through like really dense bush. So that's really tough.
Are they like machete?
I don't know if they're machete, but.
Did they bring a gun with them?
Nope. And we'll get to that.
Well, some people, a lot of people don't, I don't think. Yeah. Especially when you're in Canada. I don't know if you
that's
are
what
allowed. Well,
that was that was one of their reasoning behind not bringing a gun, because like trying to go across borders, because they're crossing the border like multiple times, right? And so that trying to get a gun across borders is difficult. And then
if it's a registered gun, you can do it. I mean,
well, I just think they just didn't want the hassle. Pain, and then it's just like it's so heavy, like it was just really, it's going to be really heavy. So
you know what's heavy? A polar bear.
This is true. Yeah. So her parents were going to drop off their next go ahead of them and drop off their next resupply at Fort McPherson, which is like part of like, I guess it's like a ranger station kind of thing there. Okay. And so she's really sad because they just missed them, because they thought maybe they'd be able to kind of see them. And so she's really upset about it. And so, but this gives her kind of like a new perspective on like being a parent, because also in this whole time she's thinking about, should they have a kid, or should they start a family, like all these different things. And she says, missing my mom and dad, like it was really hard for her. And she says, if parenthood inspires the sort of bond I feel with them right now, even from a distance, maybe my sister is right. Maybe having a child matters more than battling brush and post-holing through last season's snow. So it's just like, she's kind of realizing like that bond is like, it's a good, it's worthwhile to do.
Yep.
So yeah, and so then they get back to Wind River, which was that first river that they were on. So they do that, and she relates this one fight that her and Pat had when they were on the Wind River. So they couldn't find any trees to make this canoe that they were going to make, and so they were kind of running out of options. And so there's a dead horse, and Pat's like, well, we could make like a skin boat. Like I've heard of people making a skin boat before. We could skin this horse. And she's like, this is not happening. Like a no.
It was just like a wild horse that
had died. Yeah. And it was just there. And she's like, no, it's not happening. But she says, there's a part of me that wishes I were the one who could see opportunity in the most unlikely places. Pat has always allowed a vision to carry him where it will, even to the inside of a bloated horse. So I just thought that was interesting too. Like they sound like similar goals and ideals, but then also very different.
Well, but in the methods of actually attaining those goals are very different.
Yes, and it's just in a way similar. I felt a little bit to us. Like you see things very differently than I see them, and you see opportunity where maybe I don't. So
well, I
thought that was interesting.
Come on, if you're out in the wild, you have to be very creative and be open to doing things that you might not normally do, especially if your life depends on it. I guess they're not at the point where their life depended on it, right? Yeah. But like if you see something is like, oh, I could build something out of this. It's like, well, you take it.
Yeah.
Because what choice do you have?
What choice do you have? Yeah. Yeah. So they go, so the Wind River drains into the Peel River, and the rapids on this thing are no joke. Like, and then I looked it up because they would have gone down a bit of that Peel River. She said that they did in this canoe that they made for themselves. And I'm just like, holy shit. Like, these rapids are unfreaking real. When I looked them up, it was like, I can't believe you made a boat and that boat withstood those rapids. Like, it was nuts. So then they're going down, they get to the Mackenzie Delta. So that Mackenzie Delta, it's like one of the biggest drainages. It's one of the largest in North America. It's 50 miles across, and it drains a fifth of Canada's landmass. I didn't know it was that big. So, she's like, it's just, there's so many mosquitoes. Like, the bugs were just, and she was so miserable.
Yeah,
and it was
that's where a lot of
awful.
people in Roland Hall's lab, where they went the Mackenzie Delta.
Oh, that's interesting.
To do lots of field work. Remember Mike and Ken?
Yeah.
I think they went up there. I don't know if they were in the actual, like, the mouth, or they were just in the whole area because the whole Mackenzie River is, I mean, it's huge. It's huge. So,
it's huge.
I'm not sure if they were actually at the mouth or just somewhere along the river. But yeah, they're talking about, I remember them talking about the bugs.
Yeah.
They had, like, bugs and shotguns.
Yeah.
Because,
Yeah.
grizzlies.
Well, what's interesting is that they do see a huge grizzly, and so it charges them, but they just stand tall and just do their thing. And then so, like, 12 yards away from them, it stops, which would, like, make me shit my pants.
Oh, yeah. Well, you can't run. So.
Yeah. So
you might as well do the one thing that will give you a chance of survival. Right?
Yeah, exactly. So, then they're through the Mackenzie Delta, and then they're on the Arctic Ocean at this point. And so they're using their pack rafts when they can to go along on.
What did they do with the canoe that they rented?
Oh, they just dropped it off at Dawson City, and then
right.
Yeah, just at the Outfitters or whatever.
Right.
Yeah. So, they have a couple scary moments on the ocean, like pack capsizes at one point because the waves are really rough. So, but it's interesting, just all of the. It just sounds incredible, like what they see, the stuff that they see along the Arctic Ocean, and it just sounds amazing, just really, really cool. And so they eventually get to, it's called Herschel Island. By now it's July, and they have about 1,200 miles still to go on this trip. So, but it's interesting because she talks a lot about the history of this island, and like it was like a huge whaling station at one point. So it was just interesting kind of hearing the, just the history of the area, which was really, really cool.
Are there lots of people when they're at this point?
Like in the towns?
Well, I don't know. Are there still towns that they're going in? Like I don't know how far north they are.
Oh, they're like as far as you can go.
Right, because you're saying at the Arctic. So, but there's still towns around it. So they're going all the way at the top.
Yeah, they're right at the top right now.
Yeah, so there's still a bunch of towns then, I guess.
Well,
around there.
Not a bunch.
But towns are just, I mean, they're smaller, or just like little.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
they're going this way, and then they're curving. So they go up the Yukon, and then once they get to the ocean, they're going more left or more right towards
west.
The top of Alaska.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But there's places where they can
sometimes,
talk to humans.
Yeah. So they go there and they get like a resupply there.
Yeah.
And so they're looking at their map as they leave the island, and the last updated map that they have is from like 1956 of this area. So again, it kind of goes to what like Adam Schultz was saying about like the maps. And even there was a point where I forget where it was on their trip, where I was looking at one of the rivers and it was so pixelated that's like you couldn't even really see anything. So it goes back to what Adam was saying too about stuff, which I thought was like really interesting. And so they see belugas in the water as well.
Well, they're in the ocean.
Like, that's so cool.
So like close to their boats too.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. And so they get to another little, I'm not going to say it right, but it's Inupiaq village. And I guess that's, instead of Inuk or Inuit, I think that's the name that they use for those people. Sorry, not those people, but for the people that live there.
Just relax.
And so they get to, it's a village on Barter Island. And so before they even get to that island, they happen on to another one and they see fresh polar bear prints. And so the whole time they were going to stop there for a rest before they continued on. No. They're like, no. And so the whole time they're just like looking, because in the water, like you were saying with that, the videos that you were watching, you always have to be aware because they're in the fucking water.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. And so,
but that's even, they're just on like a little canoe thing or whatever it is, right? So polar bear on that thing is nothing.
Yeah, you're done.
People worry on like yachts.
Yeah.
If they're sailing, big sailboats.
Yeah.
They worry about polar bears climbing up those things. So let alone a stupid little raft
thing. Yeah. So, and then even in this town, when they get there, they see this like huge pile of whale bones, and apparently they just leave whatever they don't eat, like because it's subsistence harvesting of these whales, right? Because they eat them for food, obviously.
Like people.
Yeah. There's people in this village, and so they'll just leave that stuff there for the polar bears. Yeah. So what? And then the other nutso thing is like the prices in these northern towns for stuff, and because it's so hard to get food or things there. And so even just for a room, they get a room for a night.
Like at a hotel?
Well, it's not a hotel. It's like a little...
Well, but...
Yeah.
Whatever.
What they would call a hotel there. It's $225 per person.
Per person?
Yeah, that's what it says. The shower is $15 to use. A load of laundry is $25 to do. And then for a cheeseburger, because they were like, oh, we'll just get something here, $12 for a cheeseburger, and then $7 for a bowl of chili, which is just like a can. Like, it's not even anything fancy. It's just like from a can. So I just thought that was kind of
business opportunities. Move up there.
Yeah. So yeah, and so then they...
But think about, because someone's got a plane and a food, or whatever. It's crazy.
Yeah. And so they... The other interesting thing, too, is she talks quite a bit about, like, the changing coastline because of the rising water levels, and that's apparent with a lot of the erosion and the... I don't know what the word is, what I'm just going to use. The coastline is definitely eroding, and they can see evidence of that as they're walking. They also, after they leave that island, now they start to go south. And so they reach this one part called the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, which is famous because there's a ton of oil in this area, but it's also where the caribou go to have their babies. Yeah. So there's this huge debate over what to do with this area. And so there's some people that are like, well, we need to keep it because some of these people are subsistence hunters and that's what they use to eat. And so we need to preserve this wild area. But then at the same time, there's other people that are like, well, there's like no job opportunities up here. Like we need this to come in for jobs and for money and stuff like that. So so she talks a lot about like the environmental impacts of different things too, which is, and she's like pretty, like it's not like a alarmist thing. It's just like what she's observing and talking, which I thought was really, really kind of cool. So,
yeah, I mean, humans need to learn how to be able to strike a balance between economic growth and environmental sustainability.
Yeah. Yeah. So then they're going over the Brooks Mountain Range, and they basically follow the caribou trails. They've missed part of the migration, like they don't see them at this point. So they're following these animal trails, and they see wolves while they're there as well, which is really cool. Yep. What was I gonna say? So they get to another community, and so this part they've kind of just had the resupply, and they're hiking down. It's like a kind of like a hill they're hiking down, and so they're concentrating on like not falling into like this river and that they have to eventually cross. And she hears this rustle and she thinks it's a bird. And so she kind of looks over, and then she sees a black bear charging her. And so the moment she sees this, she's just like, this isn't just a chance encounter. Like, you're just kind of crossing paths. Right. This bear's been stalking us because he has a wide field of view because they're going down a hill. So he's been stalking us this whole time, like waiting. And so... yeah, they have to fight this bear off basically, and they yell at it, and he keeps coming back to them. And so finally he's had enough. Like it's too much energy he's having to put into trying to eat them. And like eventually he walks away. But she's really shaken by it. And
who wouldn't be? Yeah. Stalked by a black bear.
A black bear. But it's just like to that point, they've encountered like 47 bears at this point. There's never been an issue until this one, but it's all it takes is just one. So yeah, so they do get to like a cabin, and they had their GoPro was on at this point, and so they get to this cabin where they can plug it in and watch what had happened.
Oh, with the bear.
Yeah, and like it wasn't like the greatest footage, but it's like they keep watching it, and eventually it kind of desensitizes herself to it to know, like, to be like not afraid, because every rustle that night, she thought it was the bear coming.
Yeah, well, of course.
So yeah,
that's why you get a gun.
Yes. Yeah.
Or at least bear spray.
Yes, they had bear spray. Yeah, he did.
And?
Yeah, it just
nothing.
No, didn't do much. Yeah, so that's kind of scary too. And it was interesting because it was a black bear. It wasn't a grizzly. But apparently there's more black bear attacks than grizzly attacks, is what she was saying. So.
Yeah, I don't know if that's just, again, is more attacks in general or more attacks per how many people are around. Because in black bear country, like even there's way more areas where there's black bears where there's people present than where grizzlies are.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
Do you know what I mean? Like there's all Ontario is filled with. There's no grizzlies there, but
black bears.
It's filled with black bears, right? Yeah. So there's even bears here in Nova Scotia, black bears, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Right. So I mean.
Yep.
More
so there's more chance.
More people.
More
but again, that's where it's.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways.
So, so then they get to another resupply point, and they have this like really kind of cool meeting with the guy who he's taking care. He's like the caretaker of this little cabin on a lake. And I'm trying to like look up all these different places on like the map, and it's so cool. This lake is like you can barely see it. You have to go like super zoom in to see it, and it's just so remote and so cool. Yeah. So that's where they watch the video of the bear thing. And so while they're there, these two guys actually that are canoeing down this river that kind of runs beside the lake, they happen on this lake, and because they're going to get picked up because one of the guys was actually injured, and so they had to call in for a rescue. And so they had one of those like foldable canoes, I guess.
Okay, I've heard of those.
Yeah, and so they had one of those, and so they didn't want to have to use their pack rafts on the last river that they had to go down. And so they saw this canoe, and they're like, "Oh, that canoe looks really awesome." And so the guy just offered it up. He said, "Well, do you guys want it? Do you want to use this canoe? I can have it like dropped in your resupply when you get to like the next river." And so it was just like
because they were leaving,
they were leaving,
chop it out or whatever.
Yeah, and so and they meet some really interesting people like along this journey. And she says, "I'm reminded that this journey is as much about human connections as it is about wilderness." Yeah, and so it was.
That's the thing too. You go off and you explore the wilderness or whatever, and then you have these pockets of time where you meet people as well too, and realize that actually being part of people and having community and whatever is actually really important.
It's really cool. Yeah, and just like how kind people are, because they know you have to have that community up in the north where it's so remote, and be willing to help each other and that sort of thing. So they're hiking to the last river that they're going to be canoeing down for the rest of their trip, and so they're going to get a resupply before they get on the river. However, the weather's starting to get bad because it's starting to become like fall there, like end of August, September. And so there's a really bad weather. And so they're like pretty much out of food, but the pilot can't get in because the weather's bad. And then finally there's a weather window, but he doesn't. So she calls to see if they're going to come. And he's like, the woman that's kind of arranging it is just like, "Oh yeah, well, we have to get these clients. We're ferrying clients out while we have this weather window." And she's like, "Well, when are they going to drop our food off?" And the lady on the phone is just like, "Well, they've been waiting a long time too." And she's like, "No, I don't think you understand. Like, if we don't get this food, we're going to die." Yeah. And it's like kind of a close thing. They have to wait 5 days. So they're without food for 5 days.
Completely without food, or did they not ration?
They had a couple little it was like nothing. Yeah. So
that's why it's important, if you're going to go on these crazy trips, to number one, have extra in case things like this happen. You should kind of plan for that. But also, it's always good to learn how to fish or do whatever, or to hunt, so that you can
Yeah.
live
and I
off
don't
whatever.
know why they didn't fish.
So I think that's what Adam Schultz does.
Yeah,
when
he
goes
fishes.
on his trips. I think he gets food too, but he's like,
yeah, he
learn how to
fishes
fish
a
or
lot.
whatever. And especially in the places he sees, it's like there's fish everywhere.
Everywhere.
And these pristine, untouched lakes where you could like almost go in and grab a fish.
Yeah. So while they're kind of biding their time waiting for this food, they're reading about a book about the Brooks Range, which is the mountain range that they're in and that they're crossing. And so it talks about how like the history and how it's now this like big protected area. It's like 15 million acres.
Mm-hmm.
And so she talks about the reasons about why it's important to protect like the wild places. And again, it really reminded me of Adam Schultz. And she says, beneath these attributes is a simple fact of the human psyche. We all need to know that somewhere it's still possible to lose ourselves in the wilderness. And so I really love that. And again, it's just like Adam Schultz. So, and then, so they're starting to paddle down this last river called the Noatak River. And this is when they see the huge caribou migration. They see these caribou crossing, and it just sounds like so cool.
Isn't it like millions? Like they're in the millions?
Yeah, but they don't see, they just see like a kind of a smaller herd, but it's still, it's like thousands of them. And so, they're seeing all this kind of stuff, and the whole time in the book, it's, she's contemplating like what happens next, like after the trip. And so she talks about kind of reconnecting and finding her love for biology again. And so she says, I tell Pat I feel ready to be a biologist again. And he says, good, but I honestly don't think you ever strayed very far. You don't know how not to be a biologist. So it's like, it's always been there. It's just, she just needed to kind of reconnect with nature. So she kind of, finally figures that out towards the end of it. And so then they just kind of paddle down the rest of the river, and both of them, you can tell they don't want to get into town like on the last day. They just kind of take their time like packing up, because it's 6 months of being in the wilderness. But her dad meets her at the end, which is really cool. But what she says is, I know we may never do anything quite this grand again, but I will also never forget what is possible. So and then the epilogue is them taking their first trip with their 10-week-old son. And it's 2 years after their adventure at that point. And so she says, we will continue to navigate by the only means we know, one stroke, one footfall, one moment at a time. And I think that's true. You just take it like one day at a time. And that's like when it was really like when they had the hard spots that they went through, it was just like kind of just do one thing at a time and just get through one thing at a time. So and so they live in Anchorage in a house that Pat built, and they still have the off-grid home that they go to as well. And so she works for as a biologist for Alaska, and he still builds houses. And her Instagram is some of the pictures are just amazing.
Wow, it's just living in an amazing place.
And so she what was I gonna say? So she writes a lot of different articles, and I'm not sure when, but they got a boat and they went up, I think that same kind of inside, it's called the Inside Passage up BC, the coast of BC with and now they have 2 kids now that they did this, and their kids they're not very old. I think like 7 and 4 or something like that. So they were not very old of this when they did this, but so they're still able, you can still have adventures, like you were saying, you can still have adventures.
Absolutely.
So
you just might not take them hiking through the wilderness was filled with mosquitoes or whatever, and they're getting the kids have blisters or what have you.
But I just love the book because was really similar to Adam Schultz, where she just loves Alaska and loves nature so much, is so passionate about being a biologist and conservation. And just the North. And there was something about, I've read books about people in the jungle, but I felt so much more connected.
The North is just,
to when they're in
different,
the North. And I don't know what it is, but it just really made me feel this, like, I want to do this trip that she did.
Do you really?
Yeah, I would totally do it.
Over top of like the stuff that Adam Schultz did, or kind of like the same thing? Because I got to go back and watch the tape now of Adam Schultz, and if you were saying that's something that you want to do, because I think you would say no. But how's that different than what
I don't
she
know.
did?
I guess it's just how she talks about it, and it was just I felt such a connection with this book for some reason, and just like how she's describing it as seeing it through the eyes of a biologist. I don't know. It was just and just the North and how much she loves it.
Well, interesting, because Adam Schultz, I guess he describes it because he's more of a historian, right? So
it's a different perspective, and I guess I connected with so much of what she like her struggles, like emotionally and mentally. Like I connected a lot with it. I thought there was like a lot of similarities. I don't know.
Interesting, because I could imagine, like journey wise, like what Adam Schultz did, what she does. Yeah, it's the same thing.
I know.
You're just trekking up north in remote places.
I know.
So, but this is something that you'd want to do. Really, you'd want to go for even I'm like, 6 months. What the fuck? I don't want to do that.
Maybe I'm romanticizing it. Because I'm not like I know it would be difficult, but it would just the stuff that she's seeing, like,
yeah,
it's unreal.
You don't even want to go canoeing for a couple days down Quetico.
Go big or go home, my friend.
Wow. Well, this is interesting. Okay, well then I'll start thinking of some shit that we can do somehow. Interesting. So on a scale of 1 to 10, then in terms of do you want to do this?
10 out of 10, I would do it.
10 out of 10. So if we just start like planning it right now, we're going.
Maybe.
Oh yeah, you're backing up now. Backing up real quick. You'd have to get a couple canoes for all 4 of us.
I just think it would be incredible. It would be just like one of those once in a lifetime things.
Well, but see,
and I don't know what it is about the Arctic and the North. I don't know. I just think it's such one of these places that's just like.
I think for me, yeah, it is one place, and it's a place that I would love to move to. And I mean, right now, you just go look for employment at like in the Yukon or something like that, and just get a job there, and then just go to Whitehorse. Yeah. Or it's not Whitehorse, it's Yellowknife, right? What's the capital of Yukon? It's Whitehorse. Okay. Yeah, like I mean, go work there, go work for the government there, and then we're just there. Yeah. Because I guess for me, I'm not so much of wanting to go on a once in a lifetime trip. Yeah. It's almost I want that to just be the actual lifestyle. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Like I think that's the difference, or where I'm at these days, where it's like I don't want to just do this once in a lifetime. It's like I want to go.
I would have to see the place. I would have to see it before I committed to living there. Like I would have to visit it first and.
You think with all of what you just said, you're like, oh, I don't want to live there. You're just saying how beautiful it would be. Imagine like that house. Yeah. Even forget that, but imagine you're living in Anchorage or some place that's a town. Yeah. But it's it's a good town. It's got all the amenities you'd want in a town. Yeah. Safe for your kids, all that kind of stuff. But yet you got mountains, you got rivers, you got grizzly bears, you have all of that stuff. Yeah. You don't think that would be amazing to live there?
My only hesitation is just like I liked living in Sudbury, but Sudbury is like a fucking ugly city. It's a shitty, ugly city.
Yeah, but I think Sudbury is one of the uglier cities. Yeah. I mean, because if you look at
like Thunder Bay,
the history of Sudbury,
are gorgeous.
Yeah, like the people that have lived, in Yukon or Northwest Territories are like, it's just gorgeous. Yeah, it's just gorgeous.
It's gorgeous. Yeah, I don't know. I totally just really connected with this book. I loved it. I read it so fast because it was just so good. She's a great writer.
It just must be how it's written then that resonates with you, because again, so many books have we read of people going on trips, especially up north. It's it's hard or whatever, but maybe like you said, she didn't focus on the logistics of things, because when you're like, oh yeah, what?
She talks about her
mosquitoes all day, every day.
Yeah,
and how do we deal with that?
Well, and she talks about like her struggles, and like she talks a lot about it. Like she struggled. She doesn't romanticize it. Like it was rough, but I don't know. It's just like real. But I feel like, but then there's moments where it's just like, oh, she sees like. There's one picture in there where it's 2 moose and they're walking in the Arctic Ocean and they're backlit
walking in the Arctic Ocean, swimming maybe.
Well, they're walking. It's not super deep at where they're walking, and then they're backlit by the sunset, and the picture's in there, and you're just like, oh yeah, the mosquitoes are freaking worth it to see something like that. Like that's amazing.
I don't know. I'm shocked to hear you say that.
I know.
To be honest,
I know, and that's why I was just like, I have to tell you about this book. I don't think I explained it as good as the book was.
Well, no, I mean, that's fine. I think we're just going into the details of like just their trip and just talking about what it was. And you know, I don't know. I think I got, like, I mean, I don't know. I get why you connect with what she was saying. Yeah. Because of all the beauty, and what it reminds me of is, I think it's something that you said, or maybe other people say this as well too, is like, you know, you go through pregnancy and you go through childbirth, and it's like all kinds of hell for like, you know, what was first with Trisha was like, what, 70 hours or whatever the hell it
62.
is. Whatever it is. And you go through all that pain and suffering. And then the second you hold that child, it's like, oh, it was worth it. I'll do it again. Yeah. It's like, are you crazy? Yeah. Right. So I don't know. So I feel like that's a thing where you read the hardships or whatever, but you feel that connection that she feels, where like when you're within nature and you see that, then everything was just worth it. So so no, I get it. I think it came through.
Okay, so good. Well, good. Yeah.
So yeah, that's interesting. But so on a scale of 1 to 10 in terms of just an actual book,
10
to read. So everything's just this is just the best book that's ever been written.
Probably my favorite book I've written
so
this
far.
year.
Like you've read.
I'm sorry, I've read.
Oh, how many books did you write this year?
No, probably my favorite book I read this year, and like I've read a lot of books this year.
Yeah.
So, but it was just
The Sun is a Compass.
It was just so good. She's a really great writer.
Interesting. Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Well, maybe we should go on a trip and we should go visit.
Yeah.
And say, hey,
what's up?
What's up? Just want to take a look at your cabin. Interesting. Anything else that you want to add?
I think that's it. Yeah.
Right. Are you planning the trip? Have you planned the trip since?
No.
Because you're the planner. You're the one's going to have to plan this stuff.
Yeah. I have like a lot of questions like I'd love to ask her about like how they planned, because they didn't want to go like obviously like going like paddling up the coast, like you just follow the coastline, but like how did she decide where they wanted to go? And like especially once you get to the Arctic, that's one thing, but how did she decide to go when they went south and like across? Like how did they decide that? And
I think that's what you're saying about technology. I think a lot of it is knowing the land, and knowing how to read maps, and trying to read a map, like topographical maps, elevations, and all that kind of stuff, to kind of figure out where would be the best place to travel. Yeah. So I think it's just really being able to know that, and then using your instincts and your gut too when you're actually there, and maybe if you have to make corrections or whatever, based on the terrain. I don't know.
So
it's not like Algonquin, right, where you just go look at Jeff's maps or whatever it is, and it's like, oh, everything's just laid out for you.
No,
you know, this is
you have to figure it out. This is
different.
Yeah.
Walking through remote bushes and all that kind of stuff, it's completely different. Yeah.
So would you 100% do something like this?
Would I do so? Of course I would do something like this, me personally, and even with you, but with the kids it's a different story. Would I do 6 months like this with the kids? Hell no, there's not a chance I would do that. Would I do like a couple weeks with the kids? Sure.
Oh yeah, of course,
but not 6 months, because I don't think that's fair to bring your kids on something like that. Would I take a boat and circumvent the whole North Pole or whatever on the Arctic and do a boat along there, and that's like a 6 month trip, a year trip? Hell yeah, I would. You know, would I take a boat and sail across the Atlantic with the kids? Of course. Of course, because number one, it's obviously safety is in mind, right? Like you said, you don't take undue risks. I'm not going to take my kids through polar bear country in a canoe for 6 months, you know, and put them in that kind of risk with, you know, like if there's that bear stalking, right? What will they do? They'll pick off the smaller one. Like if you know what I mean?
That's me at this point now.
That's true. That is true.
Everybody's taller than me now. I'm the shortest one now.
Well, there you go. Well,
it's not that it's hard,
but you know what I'm saying, right? You just don't want to put your kids in unnecessary danger for, you know, unless that they're really wanting to do that. Because it's like Adam Schultz says.
Tristan would.
Well, of course he would. But like when you're a kid too, you got to learn how to go in nature and learn survival skills, whatever. Course. So to just be like to thrust them into a 6 months, like
oh yeah, that's a lot.
They're not. It's just not. It's just not smart, right?
Of course not. No.
So you'd have to build that up again. For us, like I would. Again, even for me, like if we were to like, yes, let's do it, and it would say it was just us two that were married. Yeah. I would take like at least a year to plan,
I was just
and then
gonna
to train,
say,
right? Like it's not. It's like okay, well, okay, now what is it? What are we, June now?
Yeah.
Like, okay, well, we're going to do this. Okay, it's not going to be till like May of
yeah.
2023 or whatever next year is.
Yeah.
Whatever year it is. Right? So.
But I think the difference though too is like they have so much experience, especially like with her doing all the field. Yes, they live there. Right. With her doing so much field work and having to plan like she was saying, she would have to plan so many of the logistics.
Well, we've done field work. I was a field tech.
Well, I know.
Years of field work. So I understand where.
But it's like she's a field tech where they're gonna even do right. So she probably even has like connections that she can leverage as well. So it definitely like a different thing.
Yeah. But we know what it's like too when you're out there. We know what it's like to be on the road and.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's not like we're beginners. We're amateurs. we're new on a scale of 1 to 10, probably like a 3, to be honest, in terms of experience level. You know, like Adam Schultz being like a 10 kind of thing.
Oh, geez, yeah.
And them too, right? Like.
Yeah, definitely.
So.
Yeah, and I guess I just thought it was really cool too because it wasn't just hiking, like it was we're gonna do all of these different things, which was really, really cool. So.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that is cool.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Let's get it done.
Woo.
Get it done. Go off to the Great White North. Yeah, northern Canada is just beautiful.
I know.
And Alaska or whatever.
Whatever that.
Those Americans.
Those Americans up there.
They're our friends.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the northern climate is just something that's beautiful, and we got to see it. So we got to make plans to see it somehow.
Yes, absolutely.
So I'm not sure how, but we'll do it.
Yep.
So.
Cool.
Stay tuned. We will somehow, some way end up getting there. So hopefully we'll be able to show it to you guys. Yeah. So, but until then, thank you so much for tuning in, listening, watching. We appreciate it as always.
Yeah.
Check us out, odumandandrea.com. And with that, I will say, see you next time.
Have a good week.
Bye.
Bye.